You're live.
All right, well, good afternoon again, and we will now start the work session. We'll start with Pets of the Week. Carol?
Good afternoon. I'm Carol Nelson, Digital Content Specialist with the Animal Services Center of the Mesilla Valley. We have really good news this week. Our Dog of the Week has actually already been adopted. We're super happy for Raisin because he was actually recently returned from an adoptive family because it wasn't a good fit. And so we had someone snatch him up fairly quickly. So we're super happy for Raisin. And for the time being, we actually won't be having a Cat of the Week because we're not able to keep cats long enough to be able to promote them for Pet of the Week. So also another good problem to have that they're getting adopted so quickly. But we do always like to highlight more of our animals. We want to highlight our long-term residents. And just as a reminder, the longer animals stay at the shelter, it is harder for them to thrive and they start to run into behavioral issues and things of that nature. So we always want to encourage the community to look at our long-term residents. Hulu has now been with us 344 days, Farah 299 days, Maddie 262 days, and Lily 257 days. So all really good options for adoption. And as always, we like to highlight our upcoming events. So this coming weekend, our adoption event will be at the farmers market. We'll have our adoptables there from 10 to 1. So come by and say hi, and also bring someone who is ready to find a furry friend. And we did want to put it on everyone's radar that we will be having an upcoming drive-through vaccination clinic. It will be February 22nd at the Field of Dreams from 9 to 1. So definitely come out, get your pets vaccinated and up to date on everything. And as always, for more information, feel free to visit our website or follow us on social media. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Carol. Next is the agenda items. The first one is 2.1, Police Service Aid, PSA Ordinance Revision. And we'll have City Attorney Brad Douglas and Lieutenant Austin.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Just give me a second so I can get this up. My eyes are getting bad. I can't see where to turn it into a slideshow, so you might just have to suffer with me through this. F5. Christine, the clerk of the year, tells me that it's F5. Thank you, Christine. All right, so as the mayor alluded, myself and Lieutenant Cody Austin will be making a presentation to you all with some potential amendments to the Las Cruces Municipal Code, specifically Section 2336 as it pertains to police service aides and their duties, roles, and responsibilities. And so just a short background on the topic. The purpose of police service aides historically has been to promote residents and visitors patronizing local businesses by, as it says here, regulating, managing, and operating parking meters and or parking spaces or facilities. Patrons of those businesses should expect to have easy access to those businesses. And so whenever there are parking violations, our police service aides do enforce those parking violations in the Las Cruces Municipal Court already. As part of their evolving role within the department, I believe it was in 2016, maybe 2017, there was a general order enacted at LCPD that allowed our PSAs to assist or to even take primary role with regard to the investigative portion of traffic crashes resulting in up to minor injury. So obviously any accident that involved great bodily harm or a death, our PSAs would not be handling those. Commissioned officers or sworn officers would be handling the more serious traffic accidents within the city. Although it is conceivable that PSAs might assist even in the more serious accidents. And so, as I just stated, PSAs are currently assisting with traffic crashes, but in the event that a driver is to be issued a citation For a traffic offense, the current practice is that PSAs have to wait for a commissioned officer to arrive on scene to issue those citations. And so if we don't have any available officers, it could lead to an increase in wait time where we have PSAs on scene that could already be, if these amendments were adopted, issuing citations for things like no driver's license, no insurance, no proof of registration, possibly due care collision or careless driving. And so just some quick and dirty statistics for the past 3 years. In 2023, there was a total of 3,837 crash reports taken. Of those crash reports, PSAs took 1,102. And so the percentage of crash reports taken by PSAs in 2023 was approximately, 28.7%. Then we moved to 2024. There was a total of 3,755 crash reports taken. As you can see, there was an increase in the number of crash reports taken by PSAs, increased to 2,008. And the percentage of crash reports taken by PSAs in 2024 were a little higher than 53%. And then our most recent year, 3,335 crash reports. Total number taken by PSAs, 2,249. Percentage taken by PSAs over 67%. So recent trends show us that PSAs are already taking on a larger role with regard to the minor vehicular accidents and taking those crash reports. But again, if there are accompanying traffic citations that need to be accompanied or that need to accompany those reports, those PSAs are currently having to wait for sworn officers to break off of other calls or to conclude more serious criminal investigations to come onto the scene and then issue those citations or tickets. And so what we're proposing are edits to 2336 to explicitly authorize PSAs to investigate traffic crashes resulting in up to minor injury by themselves without the need for a sworn officer. Of course, they could always ask for the assistance of a sworn officer on a case-by-case basis as may be required. But more significantly, the bigger change is authorizing PSAs to issue citations for applicable traffic regulation violations under our current municipal code during post-accident investigation. So really important to understand that whether these amendments pass or not, PSAs are not pulling people over, they're not initiating traffic stops. Any citations that they might issue under the revised code would be post-accident. So they're already on scene, they're already doing their post-accident investigation, generating a crash report, and they find out that, let's say, the driver of one of the vehicles or both doesn't have required financial responsibility, so no insurance. Again, they could write that citation themselves. Again, very important to understand that if adopted by council, PSAs still do not have arrest authority. They would not be arresting anyone. They would be issuing traffic citations. So in the event, hypothetically, let's say, because this is something I talked to Chief Story about, and I thought we were on the same page, but I just wanted to make sure. Let's say that there's a crash, and the result of that crash is someone who is suspected of being DWI. Well, obviously, PSAs don't have arrest authority. So what would happen in those instances? A sworn officer would come on to do that portion of the investigation. And if there's an arrest that's necessary, again, the sworn officer would make that arrest, not the PSA. Other factors to consider, this would potentially be more efficient as commissioned officers wouldn't have to respond to all crashes involving minor injury and or property damage. And as I just stated, the PSAs wouldn't have arrest authority. That would rest with the sworn officers. But we're already doing something similar to this throughout the city with regard to codes officers and animal control officers who have citation but not arrest authority. And just something that I was thinking about as I was generating this rather short PowerPoint presentation is that it would reduce the number of encounters between citizens and police officers. So if that's something that's important to the council, that would be a byproduct of this amended legislation. And I will stand for questions now, and I also have Lieutenant Austin here if you have any specific questions about LCPD policies or practices.
Thank you, Brad. Counselor Harris?
Thanks. I had a question that I've also received from the public, just to kind of clarify what, we've got commissioned officers, we've got codes and animal control and PSAs and park rangers. And so just kind of if you could talk a little bit about what kind of training and other certifications that the PSAs have relative to those other jobs.
Yes, Mayor, Councilor Harris, I can talk briefly about that, but Lieutenant Austin will probably be better than me. So with regard to the PSAs, I know that they've already received training with regard to like report writing, citation writing, because they already write parking citations. They've had training with courtroom procedure, courtroom demeanor. Lieutenant Austin, did you want to speak to this, or did I cover a lot of it? And I do expect there would be refreshers. I'll turn it over to the Lieutenant.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. My name is Cody Austin. I'm the Special Services Lieutenant. Before, what I have right here is our most recent academy that we had ran with the PSAs. It's a 5-week academy. I'd like to provide Ms. Rivera with a copy of them so you all have them to see what our most recent training schedule looks like. And then from there, I think it'll give you a better idea of what they have. And if you have a specific question about the duration or time that they received that training, we can go in depth there. Yes. And so as Ms. Rivera hands those out, it is front and back. And so you will see, just like any other city employee who is hired with the City of Las Cruces, the first 4 days are normally orientation, part of the onboarding that we have. From here, we would go into CIT, de-escalation, dealing with persons with mental health issues, report writing, crime identification specific to municipal code for when they are actually investigating a traffic crash, they can identify what ordinance to properly cite under. From here, we will go into crash investigation. They already received approximately 40 hours of crash investigations, along with search and seizure training, along with some defensive tactics. The PSAs are in a unique role where they have a lot of contact with the public, and there may be some things under their authority that they are able to handle. And we think it's important for them to understand clearly what their roles and boundaries are. And if they encounter something that is going to possibly result in an arrest, so as the city attorney alluded to was DWI, well, then an officer would have to be called. So we want them to be trained in observing certain actions, odors, and slurred speech and things of that nature to where we can get an officer there. If you have a specific question, Mr. Harris, Councilor Harris, I could be more than willing to answer it.
Sure. I guess it's good to see that we have specific training for de-escalation and dealing with people with mental health issues and mental impairments. I know PSAs probably have a lot of contact with the public, and park rangers and those kind of roles too. And I guess, are there thoughts about adding more of that kind of training into this regime in the future?
So yes, this 5-week schedule is not set in stone. And so if we start to see that we maybe have deficiencies or opportunities to grow, we will definitely expand this or make the necessary changes within the schedule.
Cool, thanks.
Counselor Correa?
Thank you. This is very helpful. I have a couple of sort of follow-up questions or things that I'm curious about. Somewhat training, thank you for bringing this. This is really very helpful. Related, but also, and I just have to acknowledge that I've been reading the OIR reports, and PSAs are, I would describe them as overrepresented in that sort of accountability measure that we track on, and that might have to do with measurement, that might have to do with the types of reports that are a part of it, but I'm also curious about screening and then follow-up for folks in this category, because I think, especially given that they're interfacing with the public a lot, and some of the things that we read in the OIR reports are very troubling, I would like us to have a really tight sort of screening process and then a really strong follow-up like we do with sworn officers. I understand it might not be the same level, but I think those are two areas that I would also hope have some parity or that we're paying close attention to, especially if there will be an increased interface, and increased authority given to those folks. So that's one thing that I'm curious if you can talk about. And then the other part is I feel like we're probably not naming this, but I have a sense that there's an ecosystem. There's something related to officers and their work, which is not what I'm considering as part of this. But one part of this that I'm curious about is my sense is that in insurance companies, and I don't want to name villains, but I'm going to name a villain in this conversation. But my sense is that there are increased demands for documentation and accountability in traffic accidents, and that is part of this over-reporting. So I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about if this is somewhat a response to a paperwork, bureaucratic demand that exists that is totally external to everything that any police officers or anyone has control over, but that is affecting our ability to serve the public. And you might not want to, I suspect you might not want to name a villain specifically, but I'm curious if either of you might talk a little bit about that paperwork demand. I think it relates to IPRA. I think it relates to how our public records are available and accessible. I just think there's a bigger issue here where we're bearing the burden of basically a private transactional interface, which is the whole point of a traffic report, I think, most of the time. And if that's one of the variables that's contributing to this increased response, and I understand that police officers also have increased response to demand, but I'm hoping you might talk a little bit about that. So screening and accountability, and then the second part of that is how much of this is because insurance companies are going through the rigmarole to get as much documentation as they can to never pay claims, is
Yes,
my
ma'am.
other part.
Mayor, Councilor Karan. So we have a very similar hiring process as we do to our cadets. You will actually have your written exam, you're going to have a PT test, you're going to have an oral board, you're going to have a psychological, you're going to have a medical, you're going to have a polygraph. A lot of those run concurrent to how our academy standards are. And what we have seen and reaped the benefit of is we have had 4 of our PSAs who have taken the step and transitioned into our police academy and ultimately become officers. And so we take it serious when we are trying to see who it is that we are bringing on, and we want to hold on to them for as long as possible. And so as far as for how we are bringing them on, it is very similar to our cadets. It's a very thorough and vetted process. To your second part, the numbers are concerning, and when I looked at this, when I see the rise in PSAs taking a number of crashes versus officers, it's a balance. And so I looked at it in 2 parts. And so one, we can continue to have crashes and then we're very responsive. Or we can try at least to be somewhat proactive in our higher areas of vehicle crashes to where we will work with our real-time crime center. We're working with our analysts to see and designate what are our highest areas for crashes. And then we will send our officers there to target those areas and look at the contributing factors. I have 7 motor officers that are assigned to that. You may see some updated posts to where we have them taking specific actions in specific areas. While they are busy with that, we have the PSAs that are backfilling them and helping take crashes as much as possible. We have staggered their schedule from a 7 to 5 and a 10 to 8 o'clock at night to try and capture as much as possible. What it has created is when we have the PSAs unable to issue these citations, it has really created a backlog for us because they're having to go back to an officer or pull an officer away to come and issue that citation when they had no real involvement in the case, and ultimately leading to subpoenas for them in court, and ultimately the implementation of the ROR through municipal court. What this would help us do is eliminate that by giving them a little bit more authority than what they already have, and the case would stay with them. As far as for your insurance question, it's a hassle. The IPROs that we get and the speed of which they come in, it seems like it's a race just to try to keep up. I don't know if I can go any further than that, but I'll leave that there.
Thank you. I just want to name that there are other variables that you also are accountable to that are just really bureaucratic BS. And in that case, a thing that is, I don't think it's making the public any safer. I just think it's saving someone money. And for me, that stinks in the grand ecosystem of what we do. And I understand how that is a variable in this paperwork, who can issue the paperwork and how it's issued conversation. So I just wanted to name it. So thanks. That's as diplomatic. I expect no less. Thank you for your extraordinary diplomacy, but clarity. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman.
Before I get to you, Mayor Pro Tem, Chief Story, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Jeremy Story, Police Chief. Just to clarify further, Councilor, this is really a response to two issues. One, having to call the officer to the scene to issue the citation obviously kind of undermines the whole point that Council approved the PSA program, which was to free up commission officer time. But what also happens if there's not an officer available is they'll complete the crash report, they'll go back to the station, they won't issue the citation on scene, obviously, because they can't, and then they'll send a summons in the mail later with the citation. Well, that creates problems because if it's not on the crash report right away, then it looks like I wasn't the person who did it, and then the insurance companies have a hard time figuring out who's at fault. And then the courts send out notice, and if they don't appear, well, now do they issue a warrant? This person got it in the mail, and I think all of us would say, well, I'd want to actually make sure I got that citation if I'm going to get an arrest warrant. So this is addressing concerns that municipal court has brought to us, as well as the issues on scene.
Thank you. I appreciate. Thank you for naming that aspect of it too, which I wasn't even considering. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Chief Story.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor, City Councilors, Lieutenant Austin, if approved, this is going to increase interactions. It has the potential to also increase escalated interactions. I just want to know, probably have this already. If not, what are the plans for things, safety equipment like safety vests, Kevlar gloves, other items like that that will equip the PSAs to keep them safe?
Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, I think it's a valid question and one that we have considered. And so some of those things that we have tried to address is through having high visibility uniforms for them, vests, along with aspeton and pepper spray. These are things that we would give to them, but the goal for them is not to engage. It's to be able to defend themselves and create distance and get away and summons for a police officer to come. I don't know if the numbers are going to increase that much more drastically because they are already showing up a lot of the time, and we've had good success with them already.
Thank you.
Councilor Brinkholm.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much, Officer. I actually, just to follow up on Councilor Corrin's questions, because when I was first reading about this, I also a couple flags were raised for me regarding the OIR reports that I don't have a perfect memory, but I do remember there being several, and I think there are at least 5 reports that included PSAs in the OIR reports, and I don't remember all of them when their outcomes, but I think it just reminded me that we have had some of these concerns. And so for me, I think what I would just love for you to address a little bit more, because I think a lot of folks have asked about that, but I think for me, an increase of authority means an increase in expectation of professionalism, and I just want to make sure that we speak to that and we're committed to that.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, no, that's a good point. That's something that we've kind of thought about. So even though these PSAs who are already working have already undergone, a lot of trainings with regard to de-escalation, professionalism, so on and so forth, what we were talking about is if we do identify issues in the early going, we will certainly provide them with refresher trainings. We could even, I don't want to speak for Chief or Lieutenant Austin, but another option is something as simple as, something that we do for commissioned officers is as issues come up or we see trends that are either concerning or just something that we need to discuss, what we've done in the past is we do, shift briefings, like before you go on, like these are things to consider, these are things that you might want to watch out for, and these are things that you might want to watch out for from yourself as well. And so that's something that we anticipate that there could always be growing pains. We hope not, and we don't think that there will be with this, but if there are refresher trainings, remedial training, all of that is going to be things, or all of those options are on the table.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councilor.
I don't know if you wanted to add something.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, one of the things I would like to add on to that is we already have a good model with codes and ACO who have a similar authority. And so I don't think that it's going to be a totally a new adventure into this. I think the groundwork and the foundation has been laid. And if we incorporate the higher standard that we have for our police officers as well, that I think that we can measure it. And I think Mr. Douglas had touched on a piece of that. But I also think that there's more with continued ongoing in-service training and including them more, and hopefully we can get there.
Thank you. I appreciate that follow-up from both of you. I think, and I appreciate hearing our concerns around it. I think the priority should both be safety for our officers, PSAs, non-commissioned officers included, and the public as well. So thank you so much.
Councilor Matisse.
Yeah, I just have a different question. It applies to crashes, since we have that topic being discussed, and how the state ranks. We get rankings like 50th in the nation for education, but what are we on crashes? Is there a ranking? Is there an association that ranks the state, and particularly Las Cruces, in number of crashes?
Mayor, Councilor Matisse, I've looked at that, and some of the numbers that I've compared was NMDOT, and they have a grant with UNM, which generally run 2 years behind, and they have to glean the data and review it. You will see that our numbers are significantly lower than what they are reporting. The reason for that is because it will include other areas within Las Cruces that definitely do not meet our boundaries. So we are getting some of the information from Doña Ana County Sheriffs and New Mexico State Police, which isn't directly tied to us. And so if there's a correlation between the education aspect of it, I couldn't answer that. What I could tell you is, as I look at it, it's what are the contributing factors? Where is it that we need to be, and can we be more targeted and more precise? We're trying to reduce those number of crashes, not only through enforcement, but through working with our city engineers for roadway design.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just
Go
wanted
ahead,
to say.
Councilor Grant.
I just wanted to add something to that. Thank you. My sense is actually, to Councilor Matisse's point, is that LCPD does an extraordinarily good job of tracking this, better than the 2-year delay. And you all are sort of have a lot more data points. I think that you all have a lot more data points that would be actionable than the folks in the county or in other parts of New Mexico. So I really just wanted to say thank you for that. And I think this would be I think this is all about data too, right? Our own paperwork, piles of paperwork that we create. This helps us have that data more meaningfully documented and more consistently documented, as you and Chief Story have alluded to. So I just wanted to thank you for, I think, being a leader in the community in that that annoying 2-year gap report. I know that you guys are more on it than that is. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
All right. Yeah, I had a few questions. First of all, when did we start again? Having PSAs with LCPD?
June of 2016 is when they first came out.
And how many do we currently have?
We currently have 9 full-time positions.
And, I'm going to say I like the program. I like what it does. It's no different than when we look at priority dispatching. We want to make sure that if we have an extrication or an injury, or if we just have a fender bender, that we're sending the right resources out there and we're not duplicating services. So this is a great way of doing it on the police side. And it's also training ground. I guess you said that 4 have converted over to becoming police officers. This is a great introduction to the police service. So I think this is on the right track. And again, the checks and balances. I'm sure as part of the 5-week training, there's what we've learned since 2016 is continued education and CEs and those type of things. The other thing is more for legal, is if there's any citations that go to municipal court, who is trying these cases as a case agent?
Mayor, that's a good question. So typically, these would be officer prosecute cases. So my office, for example, has taken on a heavier caseload with regard to certain enumerated crimes. So the city attorney's office prosecutes DWI, for example, battery, assault on a peace officer, shoplifting, to try to, and a number of others, to try and sort of have our officers engaging in what we think of as more traditional crime detection, law enforcement activity. So if this were to pass, the PSAs right now, they prosecute their own parking citations. They would be prosecuting these, but what I'll say is my office is happy to be a resource for any PSAs that need us, because they are going to be taking on increased responsibilities.
Okay, so this is similar to our code officers in animal control, but your office is there for any checks and balances, any trends, any things that are taking place that we can see that we need to make some changes or additional training?
Mayor, that is correct. Just like we already do for our code section, for our animal control section, we'll be a resource for those PSAs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, I think we're good. So we can move to the next item on the agenda, 2.2, the annual Inspector General brief. That'll be Mr. Charles Tucker.
Let me get my glasses. Good afternoon, Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. I'm going to open up my slide deck here in a second. And okay. What was it? F5. Thank you. I should have been paying more attention. I know you said it earlier and I couldn't remember. So, good afternoon. My name is Charles Tucker. For the counselors that don't know who I am, I'm the Inspector General for the City of Las Cruces. And I'm going to go over a quick, in this slide deck, I'll go over a quick what my roles and responsibilities are so that you guys are aware of exactly what I do and what I provide for the city. So IG areas to cover, I'll cover the hotline cases for fiscal year to date 2024 and 2025. And when I say fiscal year to date, that's from July to June. So, and then I'll talk about the investigations that I've done this past year, and then my outreach that I provide for the city of Las Cruces. So Division 6, Accountability and Government. The Inspector General and the City Auditor shall annually report to the City Council completed internal audits, activities, and investigations. This will serve as a report by the Inspector General. My role as the IG for the city will be to investigate fraud, waste, and abuse of city resources, and that includes city funds, city property, city employees, and city services. So what is fraud, what is waste, and what is abuse? Fraud, obtaining something of value through willful misrepresentation. Waste is the act of using or expending resources carelessly, extravagantly, or to no purpose. and that abuse, behavior that is deficient or improper when compared with the behavior that a prudent person would consider a reasonable and necessary business practice given the facts and circumstances. I bet you'll never guess where that definition came from. Brad. So, brief to council, how are complaints received and provided to the IG? Avenues to receive complaints include the City Board of Ethics, City Complaints Reporting Mechanism, which is our hotline, city employees, city residents, or anybody with a complaint against the city. Jurisdiction and authority of the Inspector General. 2-177.1A, the Inspector General shall have the authority to investigate municipal matters that involve elected or appointed officials, employees, municipal agencies, and instrumentalities, contractors, their subcontractors, and lower tier subcontractors, and other parties doing business with the city or receiving city funds. The IG may undertake a formal investigation of any matter if it appears to the Inspector General that such matter falls within the scope of responsibilities described in this division, primarily fraud, waste, and abuse. The IG will not investigate criminal acts. The IG will refer the complaint to the appropriate prosecuting authority or law enforcement agency. The IG will not investigate anything in the jurisdiction of the police or the fire department internal affairs. The IG will refer anything that warrants an audit to the Office of Internal Audit. The IG will not investigate complaints of discrimination or labor law or threatened or pending litigation. So I have two other off-site locations besides my office here in City Hall. I go down to the BMO building. We rent an office down there, and I'm down there Monday, Wednesday, and Friday by appointments only now. And then I also go out to the two locations, one out on the East Mesa at the Sage Cafe, and that's on the second and fourth Thursday of every month, and I'm out there from 2 to 4. And then I go to the Frank O'Brien Papin Community Center on the first and the third Friday of every month from 2 to 4 as well. And that gives the citizenship. There's people that don't want to come to City Hall because of the cameras to talk to the IG. So it gives them the opportunity to come talk to me, even though we have cameras out there too. But they'll, if need be, they can meet me at the BMO office and we can talk there. So problems or peeves. Citizens and employees that are using the hotline to report issues that are not IG appropriate. Right now, we do get a lot of those. So be sure to give your supervisors, and this is what I always tell the employees of the city, be sure to give your supervisors, managers, and directors a chance to correct problems before you come bring them to me. So anonymity, anonymous complaints can be made through the hotline. We will not attempt to discover who the complainant, nor will the complainant receive any correspondence from the IG. Complainant can talk to an IG face-to-face and request to remain anonymous. There is no guarantee of anonymity, but the IG will strive to protect your requested anonymity. And the sphere of activity is all city property, personnel, services, and resources. So currently right now on the hotline, we've received 400, it says 488. As of this morning, it's 493. We allow 100 per year, and the contract runs from January 28th to January 27th of the next year. So we're coming up on the end of that contract year, and as long as we stay under 100, we pay a flat fee. If we go over, then we get charged per complaint. So far this year, we've had 62 complaints. That's from January 28 to present, and 18 are still open. So February 2025, we had a total of 79 complaints, so we remained under that 100. Fiscal year 2024, we went over, and we ended up paying about $3,000 in extra costs because we exceeded that number, that 100. So right now, our top categories are employee relations, policy issues, well, this is 2025, excuse me. Employee relations, policy issues, fraud, 11%, theft of time, 11%, and conflict of interest. For 2026, we've had a total of 59 complaints so far. Policy issues, again, are 22%. That leads the policy issues and employee relations are the top two. Fraud, 9%, theft of time, 9%, and conflict of interest, 9%. So far this year, these are the investigations that I've done. We've had an allegation of theft from Parks and Recreation that was referred to LCPD. It turned out not to be anything. Unfair hiring practices, library, that was referred to HR. An allegation that a contractor was committing fraud, that was referred to LCPD. That turned out not to be substantiated as well, thank goodness. Employee was stealing time, that was substantiated, and I believe that employee was terminated. South Central Solid Waste, that was submitted to the State Auditor General, and I don't know what they've done with that report so far. Employee theft of time, that was not substantiated. I've got 2 complaints from the Animal Services Center that I'm just waiting to sit down and talk with the new director out there, because that's not really, their HR issues are not something that I can take care of. So I'll talk with them. They're just personnel, I guess, conflicts with other personnel. Potential employee nepotism, I looked at that one so far, and that was not substantiated. And there was a report of animal abuse that the animal control officers are currently working right now. And it's a pretty ugly one, so. And that is my brief. Are there any questions?
All right, thank you, Charles. Any questions? Councilor Harris.
Thank you. This is kind of a random question, but when you say that we're allowed 100 complaints on the hotline, is that like 100 dials, 100 real complaints? This is all new to me, so I'm just curious.
Thank you, Counselor. If the complainant leaves a complaint, that counts as a complaint. So even if it's somebody complaining about people not flushing the toilets in City Hall, that counts as a complaint if it goes to the hotline. So, and we have 2 sides of the hotline. We have a employee side and we have a public side. So, and all of those count as 100. They're all balled into the same 100. And we've only exceeded that number once since I've been here, so.
Okay, good to know, thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Mayor, City Councilors, Mr. Tucker, on the complaints that are employee related, so you say you don't handle those, but those employee relations, you don't handle those?
Counselor, yes, Mayor Pro Tem, excuse me. I do, if it's something that involves fraud, waste, or abuse.
Gotcha.
If it's personality issues, I'll let a director or I'll send it to a manager for them to look at and let them do, work that through. I try to stay out of stuff that's not fraud, waste, and abuse.
Gotcha. And so, Mr. Tucker, Bradley, so I'm assuming that there's some HR training or some sort of training that employees know how and what should go to the hotline, or feel comfortable going to the hotline, or how does that work? I'm new also, so I'm kind of learning.
I think, like I said, I try to stay in my lane with
Gotcha.
fraud, waste, and abuse. When it comes to HR issues, I think when by the time I get the complaint, they're pretty frustrated.
Okay.
So they may have tried to use their managers.
Okay.
And especially when it comes to the Animal Services Center, they had no director for a long time. They had an interim. And I think there was a lot of finger pointing at people that was going on. So that's why I wanted to talk with the new director once they're in place and sit down and let them know what I've seen that's come across my desk, just to give them a heads up.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, no, I was just trying to, looking at optimizing your time and ensuring that we're not spending more taxpayer money than we need to spend. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, training and communication would definitely help.
Yes, sir.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it, Councilor.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilor Corinne.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I really appreciate that follow-up with the ASCMV specifically, or any time that you feel like this is happening in an area that you can do some education with folks about the best ways to address it. I really appreciate you doing that proactively, so thank you. I just sort of wanted to follow up too with you all. I know we also get in a different presentation, we get climate survey results typically to council, so I think some of the things that probably boil to you are also represented in those. So I know we get those each year. I can't remember what the timeline is for those. And then we also get our audit, which I think is coming to the next meeting or one of the next 2 meetings. So just to triangulate some of the things that you talked about, other domains, we do hear about some of those too. So there's an opportunity for that feedback too. So I appreciate you seeing those different spheres and sending things in the directions that they go. I was hoping you could just talk a little bit about how you interface with the Oversight Committee. I say this because I also am not on the Oversight Committee, and I know that they are working on things, that you work with them pretty closely. So I'm just hoping you could just talk a little bit about that, just to get us all on the page, because this is the first time we've had this conversation. So thank you for doing it and being here.
Councilor Coran, thank you for that question, by the way. And I also wanted to point a fact that I've been dreading going down to the Animal Services Center because I had to put a dog down, and every time I go down there, I end up walking through all those cages and looking, and I want to take them all home, and it kills me every time I leave and I don't bring a dog with me. But
I can help you with that if you need it. Just for the record, we can talk offline.
But I do work with the Oversight Committee. We meet, so sometimes it's once a month, sometimes it's once every other month. It depends on how many cases we have. Right now, our ordinance calls for me to have my cases go before anything that I investigate. It gets redacted, and then it goes to the Oversight Committee for them to review. And then they can make comment if they don't agree with my findings or they don't agree with my issues that I identify. They have the ability to attach another document to that, and then that'll go to the city manager. So, but they review everything that I've done, that I do.
Thank you. So there are connections, but also it's an independent sort of conversation. So
correct.
Thank
and
you.
if I'm doing something incorrect, or if I'm scanning over something that should not be, like initially we had a problem with our redacting process that was going on with the cases. They were redacted when I would look at them online, but somehow when they got emailed, all the redactions would be gone. So it's like, oh, we got to figure that out. So that was an issue, and everything was just laid wide open. And we're trying not to do that because we don't want to, point people out to the public on some of the issues that we're taking care of within the city. So we got that fixed. But yes, everything that I do, that I investigate, is reviewed by the Oversight Committee.
Councilor Matisse.
Yeah, just for the benefit of the new members, when the Oversight Committee and the Inspector General, there was a sort of a sabbatical. How many years was it not happening?
I believe it wasn't I can't remember exactly when we started the Oversight Committee up, Councilor Matisse, I'm sorry. I can't remember exactly when we started the Oversight Committee up again, but I know the Oversight Committee closed down in October of 2023. That was under Mr. Ekman. And then there was a part, maybe we went a whole year without an Oversight Committee, and then we started one back up again. I can't remember exactly what month it started, but I don't know if you remember, Brad? Or
Mayor,
Councilor?
I believe that we were effectively without an oversight committee for approximately 9 or 10 months.
Okay, yeah, it may not have been a year then, Councilor Matisse.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. Thank you.
And also, I wanted to let you guys, let the council know, I also am the liaison for the Veterans Advisory Board. And so I do that as well. And I have really, really, really enjoyed working with my fellow veterans on that for the city. So that's been fantastic. So, and now I'm taking care of calls coming in from other sources. So I've got a whole folder of complaints that I'm working on now from a habitual complainer. So.
Okay, Charles, a question. When you say that some of them are either employee relations or policy, are you gathering that data to see what those policies are and then the data from maybe where those departments, those employee relation problems are coming from, so that it can either be a policy change, training, or something of that effect?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mayor. A lot of times what will happen is when somebody gets onto the hotline and they're making their complaint, they'll select something like employee relations. And it's not really employee relations, it's something like somebody was acting out during a meeting or something like that, and another employee didn't like it. They don't want to go to their boss because they fear retaliation, so they just call it into the hotline. And it's not really an employee relations, it's just personality issues. But yes, I gather all the data, I have all the data if we wanted to go through it. But anytime we see something where it's a policy issue, then that will be addressed if it truly is a policy issue. A lot of times what will happen is when we get these things, everything I get on the hotline goes to a hotline committee, which consists of the 2 assistant city managers, Brad and Joe, our HR director. We all develop a course of action, and then those investigations will either be sent down to a director for them to investigate or have one of their subordinates investigate, or it'll come to me to investigate. Or if it's not even something that we should be taking care of, like it'll go to either Lieutenant Alva over at the LCPD, or we'll send it down to whoever it belongs to. If it's one of our JPAs, we'll send it down there and have them do whatever they need to do with it. But then, but anything that's a policy issue, yes, we'll look at, and we'll make sure if we need to update our policies, we'll all talk about it at that point. Because it's not only me making those decisions, it's everybody on the committee.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you for the presentation, and thank you for serving as a liaison for the veterans. I really appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, City Council. Thank you.
Okay, that's the last item on the agenda, so I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
This is on the motion to adjourn the work session. Counselor McClure?
Yes.
Counselor Matisse?
Yes.
Counselor Harris?
Yes.
Counselor Bencomo?
Yes.
Counselor Cran?
Yes.
Counselor Munoz?
Yes.
And Mayor?
Yes.